Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2018, Congress passed a bill which was signed into law by President Trump that relaxed regulation for institutions like Silicon Valley Bank. That law, which I opposed, exempted those banks from enhanced prudential standards, stress tests, raised the threshold at which a bank would be considered systemically important. But even as that law kept Silicon Valley Bank off the list of systemically important institutions, the Fed and the FDIC rightly cited systemic risk to justify their actions to prevent runs on other banks. So, Mr. Barr, Mr. Gruenberg, each of you voted to invoke what is known as the, quote, systemic risk exception. So with a simple yes or no, can you tell me that the situation at Silicon Valley Bank posed systemic risk?
Thank you, Senator. I think it's an absolutely crucial question. The invocation of the systemic risk exception required judgment as well as incoming data. And our best assessment, the assessment of a unanimous Federal Reserve Board and a unanimous board of the FDIC and the Treasury Secretary, was that we were seeing signs of contagion in the banking system that threatened to put at risk depositors and banks across the country. And to make sure that banks could continue to lend in their communities, to make sure that depositors were safe, to make sure that businesses could pay payroll, well, we thought it was important to invoke that systemic risk determination and prevent that.
You felt that Silicon Valley Bank was a systemic risk at that point in time?
The judgment was really broadly about the risk that the failures of these institutions and other stresses in the system were posing as a whole, as opposed to a particular decision.
It seems to me that sounds like a distinction without a difference. If any single bank's failure can cause contagion, that threatens the system, then it seems that the bank should be considered systemically important. And so we need, you all need to have an obligation to be clear with us and with the American people when you took extraordinary steps to protect uninsured depositors that could very well lead to increased fees charged to banks and ultimately to consumers. So I think we need to be clear about what is a systemic risk. And so I'm looking forward to a more crystallized version of that. I was here in 2008. I don't want to live through it again. Do you agree with President Biden's statement 2 weeks ago that Congress should strengthen rules for banks to make it less likely that we will see another failure similar to that of Silicon Valley Bank?
Thank you, Senator. I think it's important for us to strengthen capital and liquidity rules. We're working on strengthening them as part of our Basel III reforms and our holistic review of capital. And I think we need to move forward with that. And as both Chair Gruenberg and I suggested, with a long-term debt requirement that would provide an additional cushion in addition to capital for large institutions. That work will need to go through notice and comment rulemaking. There will be transition periods for it, but I think that is really important work for us to do, and I'm committed to doing it.
Well, let me ask you, Mr. Barr, this morning I, along with Senator Rounds and other members of this committee, sent a letter to Chairman Powell asking him to explain whether the Feds applied enhanced supervision or prudential standards to Silicon Valley Bank or any similar-sized bank using the Fed's existing authority. We've also learned from public reporting that Fed supervisors began flagging problems as a SVB as far back as 2021. Now, I understand we have a lot more to learn about the facts of what transpired, both at the bank with any management failures, but I expect that we're going to see that all factored in as part of a review. So as you begin that review, let me ask you, do you agree with Chairman Powell's statement last week that from what we know, it is, quote, clear that we do need to strengthen supervision and regulation?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that statement.
Thank you for that. Now, lastly, what I would love to know, Mr. Greenberg, about as we think about should we raise the federal deposit insurance, what percentage of account holders does that account for, how much is private versus business, and what are the costs that are associated with it. So I'll just put that out there for you to submit an answer to the record because it will take more time than what I have. But the last point I want to make is we have seen a flight from regional and community banks to quote-unquote too big to fail banks. And a concentration of deposits at a select few institutions also brings about its own risks to the financial system. At the end of the day, it seems that we are incentivizing entities to go to too big to fail banks. It only makes it even more consequential in terms of too big to fail. Is that what we want to ultimately achieve in this process?
Senator, I think that the goal of the actions that we took are to make sure that we have a thriving and diverse system of banking in the United States, including community banks and regional banks that are the lifeblood of many communities all across the country.
Thank you.
Senator Menendez.